Hello, fellow Demon fanatics. I'm Binman. Welcome to the Stats File Preview podcast. This week previewing the upcoming Bombers game on Saturday and reviewing, doing a statistical deep dive into our fantastic win over Collingwood on King's birthday. Big freeze, huge week. It was before I go on, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording this podcast, the Bunurong people. Pay my respects to elders past and present, emerging leaders who are listening. Just as a bit of housekeeping, I'm recording this on Wednesday, and hopefully Andy will get it out and published tomorrow on Thursday. I've got a really flat out week after tonight, but also I wanted to hopefully get it published before before Friday or tomorrow, hopefully, so people who do want to listen to it have got time to do so before we play on Saturday. So I'm going to review, do probably a big deeper dive into the Collingwood game and not such a deep dive into the Bombers game. There's so many variables in that game. It's a little hard to sort of unpack from a stats and even sort of a tactical perspective. So, I'll probably focus most of this pod on the unpacking our fantastic win over the Pies on Monday. It was a great win. Not a great game standard-wise, I have to say. I actually thought we played much better, for instance, in our loss against the Dogs. And it's funny how a win changes perspective on a performance. If De Goey kicks that goal, good chance we lose. If we lose, it's all doom and gloom on Demon Land. All our errors are forensically highlighted, dramatic music on 360. We unpack all of our errors in those last 2-3 minutes, of which there were many. Everyone, bemoans a lost opportunity to cement our spot in the top 6 or top 10. And as I say, all is doom and gloom. Win and all is well with the world. Certainly from my perspective, it makes for a better week having won that game. I could not have stand losing another game against the Pies after, the last 6 games we've lost against them, and there have been some heartbreaking losses amongst them. I wasn't going to go to the game, and I did. Really pleased I did, obviously, though I didn't think that when De Goey marked. I felt sick in the stomach. Ages ago, I decided that I was not going to go to Pies games anymore, just because it was so distressing the last few times I've been, but particularly, obviously, the final where Gus was concussed, and but I thought I was offered a ticket, and I thought I'd go along for because of Neil, really. So very glad I did. Fantastic win. Great to get that monkey off the back. And another win at the G. What's that? Is that 7 wins at the G this year? That's heading towards fortress territory. Fantastic stuff. Both teams were gassed in this game. I think that's an important, caveat in terms of the analysis of all of the data and also our performance. I sat next to a Pies fan who said to me early in the game they were crying out for their bye. They hadn't had their bye. Their byes this week. He was saying that they were really gassed and had been for the last sort of month, and that's how they looked. Some of their clangers were just shockers. Some of ours were too, for that matter, but some of theirs were just complete howlers. The best kick in the AFL, Dacos being one of them. 2 or 3 of his kicks inside their 50 were unbelievably poor, and a couple of them triggered turnovers that we scored from memory. So, both teams their skill was pretty poor. There's a bazillion sort of brain fades, poor handballing, handballing to feet both sides, turnovers, clangers. It was not a great standard game. But, I think that's a function, as I said, of 2 teams that mid-season all teams struggle, particularly if they haven't had a bye. I'm pretty right. I think I'm right in saying we haven't won a game where we've lost the contested possession differential. Perhaps maybe 1 or maybe 2, but if so, never by much if we have, and certainly not by the differentials in this game. So in this game, the Pies, so they're an aging team. They've yet to have a bye, so they were tired. Yet they had they were +7 for contested possessions. The Pies were +13 for ground ball gets. They were +7 for post-clearance contested possessions and +5 for pre-clearance contested possessions. It really is amazing we won with those numbers. You don't often win, or we certainly don't. Our game is based around contest and intensity and running as well, of course. But, fundamental to our game and for all teams really is winning the contest first and foremost. And +13 for ground ball gets. I don't know. I can't imagine we've won many games in the last... Well, certainly not this year, where our opposition has been +13 for ground ball gets. It's a really critical stat. We were smashed last week, for instance, in ground ball gets by the Giants, absolutely smashed. So amazing we won, but I think those numbers speak to our fatigue, as I say, particularly smash for ground balls, which, when it's out in the open and you want to win them. This is what I said last week about the Giants game. They won those ground balls, and the Pies did on Monday. Yet we were able to fight our way through. And I think it was awesome how we fought out the game. I really thought we were gone, if I was going to be honest. And, we fought all the way to the end of the line. Before this game, the Pies had won 4 of 5 matches when they'd led at three-quarter time, whilst we'd won just once from 6 matches where we've been ahead at three-quarter time. So, I'll say that again. So before this game, the Pies had won 4 or 5 matches where they led at three-quarter time. We'd just won one of 6 matches when we've trailed at the final change. So, 6 times we've trailed at three-quarter time and only won one of those games. So fantastic fighting effort by the boys to win this, particularly given it looked like, we were in trouble in that third quarter, and it looked like we were in trouble in that last quarter as well. I think Selwyn and the high performance team deserves a huge amount of credit. Obviously, as I said, we were fatigued, yet we still had enough in the tank to fight all game and keep going all the way to the end. And, I think I got the sort of assessment right in terms of us targeting this game and targeting last week's game and this game. A huge game, of course. We want to win at the G, but massive build-up to this game. It's a hugely important game for the club. We wanted to be in our best position to win the game, and so I think Selwyn Griffith and the high-performance team deserve a massive amount of credit for getting us there and in shape. So, whilst we're obviously fatigued, we still ran out the game well and had enough in the tank to fight all game, as I said, and keep going all the way to the final bell. Because they are tired, because they are desperate for the bye, I rate this win even more highly than I otherwise would. I think just so much resilience and heart, and that's what you want to see at the end of the day. And come finals, that's what win finals is: resilience, heart, and refusing to throw the towel in to play on, as Neil famously has said. I really, really think it was a terrific win, from a range of perspective. So I rate that win even more highly than what I think was our best performance of the year, our most complete performance, our win over the Hawks. The players had to dig deep, and all the players did exactly that. I felt like they were boxers out on their feet, and they kept punching. Makes the victory even more memorable and really fitting. That fight and refusal to give up and to keep going and to push all the way through was really fitting, I think, given the day and given we were honouring the game was honouring Neil Danaher. Fantastic performance. So well done, boys. Really impressive. Amazing we won, though. It really, I'll go through the numbers in detail in a sec, but it really, in some respects, it's amazing we won. I mentioned it was amazing we won given the contested possession differential, and in particular being the Pies being +13 for ground ball gets. Another amazing thing about yesterday's win is we won despite the Pies having 4 more clearances for the game. I said in the preview last week that critical for the Pies' chance of beating us and critical for our chances of winning was going to be the contest, winning the contest, winning the clearance battle, just the raw total, and winning scores from clearances and stoppages. So they had 4 more clearances for the game. Remarkable, given given Cameron is not anywhere near the class of Maxi as a ruckman. Maxi was clearly injured and he was off the ground for 10, 15 minutes. I didn't realise this until afterwards. He was in the room for 10 minutes getting his shoulder worked on. He couldn't move his shoulder. I think it was his right. But a few times when Buller outmarked him, that doesn't happen. And, so clearly he was hampered. So that's probably a big factor in them winning the raw clearance total. We were plus 12 for scores from stoppages. So, despite being them having 4 more clearances, we were plus 12 for scores from stoppages. So that's positive. And you could argue, well, we won by 8 points. There's the win right there. But that's still low for us. We would have gone into the game hoping, maybe for plus 20, plus, something like that. But we only scored 7 points from centre bounces, which is half our season average, for example. So they would have been well pleased with winning contested possession differentials, winning the ground balls, beating us in the clearance numbers, and only being down 12 for scores from stoppages. They would have taken that all day, every day before the game. And I think that, watching McRae's presser after the game, he was clearly frustrated. I think that they had expected to win this game. I guess that's obvious, but he seemed really frustrated and annoyed. I think a lot of their planning was around winning those things, and they did, yet still won. So, just in terms of the preview last week, what did I get right and what did I get wrong? In the preview last week, I predicted that Pies would try and avoid a shootout, and make the game a tight, low-scoring, dour, defensive struggle. I was wrong on that front, that's for sure. The opposite was the case, I think. Oh, not I think. The opposite was the case. The Pies actively tried to make it a shootout with the ball flying between the two arcs. It was bouncing back and forward like a yo-yo. I suspect they did so because they assessed we were a young, fatigued team that might blow up, and if stretched, that their more seasoned team would be better placed to deal with a high-octane running game. And I think there's plenty of evidence to support that assessment. For example, our transition from defensive half to forward 50% was well above our season average, and theirs was just below AFL average. So, that shows that both teams' transition game was in good order, and it was moving back between the arcs. But the most notable evidence to support the idea that both teams, or that the Pies came in to attack and to look to create a running game, was the handball metres gained stat. The Pies had over 900 metres gained from handball. I think that's their second highest metres gained from handballs ever since that stat's been recorded. Against who we've played this season, in matches we've played, only the Swans have had more metres gained by hand against us this year. You might remember I talked about it, insane, 1,023 metres in that game, handball metres gained. Just a reminder on handball metres gained, it includes the running with the ball, which I think is a really important sort of definitional thing about handball metres gained. So, use the example, player gets a handball receive, runs, maybe gets a handball receive that's a 15-metre forward handball, runs 15 metres, and then another 15-metre handball. That's 15 metres for the handball and 15 metres for the run. So, and then handballs again, that's 45 metres gained by hand. I think that's that they don't actually. They should say that when they're providing the analysis on the coverage on Fox and 7, because it's a bit misleading otherwise. The Swans' high scoring is driven by their handball metres gained, and it's really evident when you watch them. It requires that sort of method requires all team wave running, super fit teams, really great runners, an athletic profile that supports that, and it's that strategy is why when you watch the Swans play, the ball ping pongs between the arcs in their games, and that's exactly what happened against the Pies in our game against the Pies. It was bouncing back and forward between the arcs. But we were also definitely trying. So I was correct about this. I thought that as I said, I thought we were set for this game, and that we would look to attack, and we did look to attack. We were much less kicking long to a contest. We were much sort of trying to create run and overlap and get that going. And King talked about during the week of freeing the players up and not overcoaching and sort of encouraging them to go back to playing on instinct and more naturally. We were playing a very similar method to the Pies. So there were two teams playing a very similar method. And we were also, we were definitely trying to chain up by hand as well in the way that we do when we've played our best, most exciting footy this season. And again, the evidence of that is our handball metres gained numbers. We had 628 handball metres gained in this match, 228 more than our season average, and way more than we had against the Dogs and the Giants, which was 350 and 359 metres gained by hand, respectively. So, we really dialed up the handballs. The short version of that is both teams tried to engineer a flowing, low stoppage game, that was bouncing between the arcs. So, in essence, a transition game. Just in terms of the low stoppage, for context, there were 81 stoppages in the Dogs game, 72 against GWS, which was a flowing game of footy, 72 in the Hawks game, which was also a flowing game of footy, and only 74 in this game. So it was a low stoppage game. It was a sort of high transition game, and going into it, I thought that would certainly suit us and play into our strengths. But I think, as I said, the Pies were pretty confident they'd be able to overrun us. As I mentioned last week, all the clubs would have a super, super, super good handle on where the other clubs are at in terms of their high performance program and their capacity to run out games and their running power and all of that stuff. None of that would be a mystery to the clubs. So, I think that McRae and the Pies thought that they would be able to beat us for the running power, which I think partly is why McRae was so frustrated. I think he was pretty confident they'd win that game before, during, and right up to the very end. So it was I think it definitely both teams tried to engineer a flowing, low stoppage game. So, which is partly why it was sort of entertaining in that respects, though low skills, and we were just too sloppy by hand and foot to really make that strategy work in terms of a real sort of scoreboard impact. But fortunately, the Pies were as well, and so the clangers, brain fades, turnovers, all the basic skill errors, the shanks, the poor decisions, there were some shocking decisions. I think fatigue is a key factor in all of those things, but nonetheless, they were all evident. All of those things meant neither team could leverage their really positive ball movement and transition into effective scoring. I mentioned the Swans game, and it provides an interesting comparison, actually, to this game. The total metres gained by hand in that match, both teams, was 1,484 metres gained by hand. In the game just gone against the Pies, the total metres gained by hand was 1,528. So what's that? 80 odd more than against the Swans game. You wouldn't be thinking that going into the game. Well, I certainly wasn't last week thinking that the Pies would try to make it a sort of slow, dour game, that they held the ball in the back half, which they didn't. They were go, go, go. We were go, go, go. I'm guessing 1,528 total metres gained by hand across both teams would be right up there for the most metres gained in any individual game this season. So I might have a look at that to see whether I can drill down on that. But, that's super high, higher than, as I said, in that Sydney game. And there was actually more stoppages in that ultra fast. That Swans game was ultra fast and back and forward. Albeit it was at the Swans, but there were more. At the Swans, albeit it was at the SCG, which is sort of obviously a tighter confines. There were actually more stoppages in that game, than in this game. There were 89 89 stoppages in the Swans game. There were 74 in this game, which again speaks to a open, flowing game of footy. Another sort of data point in comparing the two games. In the Swans game, there were 637 total sprints, 72 repeat sprints across both teams. And in the Pies game, really similar numbers, 632 sprints and 67 repeat sprints. Just definition, sprints are defined by a player running above 24 kilometres for at least 1 second. So, really similar in terms of the repeat sprints, the number of sprints, the handball metres gained. really similar, obviously, in terms of a fast end-to-end ball movement driven by high meters gained by hand and attacking ball movement. The big difference between the two games was the scoring. In our loss to the Swans, we scored 114 points. We could only manage 83 points in our win on Monday. The total match points in the Swans D's game was 245. Crazy. In this game, it was on a perfect day for footy, not a breath of wind. There was none of that MCG winter sort of dew that can settle in on the game that starts at 3:00. Absolutely ideal game, conditions for footy. The total match points in this game was only 158, and it was remarkably low scoring. So, 95, whatever, 90 odd points less than against than was the case in the Swans game earlier, round 8, I think it was. So, terrific win. But let's not sort of over egg the pudding in terms of, in terms of the performance. So let's look at some of the numbers. And just before I do go to that, I think that in terms of, it's better to look now at the totality of the season, sort of to try and get a handle on our ceiling. What our ceiling might be and where we're at the moment. Rather than looking at the last 3-4 games, because we're clearly tiring, much better to look at the whole season in totality. And the ladder doesn't lie. So more than halfway through the season, meaning we've got more than big enough sample size to provide a really good, solid assessment of where we're at. We're 5th on the ladder, equal points with 4th, having played all bar the Cats of the top 16. Top 6 teams. So for me, that's much better way of looking at it than sort of focusing on our performances in the last 3-4 weeks, because that just skews the sort of thinking and isn't an accurate assessment of where we're at. So, as I said, the ladder doesn't lie. 5th on the ladder, percentage over 100, in really good shape, sort of just past the halfway mark of the season. The other thing about this game that was really important was beating the Pies. It doesn't guarantee us a top 6 spot, but it all but guarantees us, not far off it. The wheels would have to dramatically fall off for us not to be a top 10 side, in part because the Pies are a competitor, so we've helped make it more difficult for the Pies. If we end up competing with them, we're now essentially 3 games clear of them. I think that's 10 points, so essentially 3 games clear. But leaving that aside, it massively increases our chances as well for winning making top 6, which, as I've said before a number of times, is really going to be critical for us to have, any hope of making an impact come finals. Is, finishing top 6. As we get closer to the finals, this will be a big talking point in the media, is just how much disadvantage there is for finishing 7th and 8th compared to in previously. It really is a massive, massive change to the final system. All right, so let's have a look at the stats. We'll unpack that. We'll go through all of the key numbers. We're going to start with the key stats. So disposal efficiency, as I said, it's probably not such a great number anymore, but we just matched slightly better than them, 73.3%. To 72.5. Our kicking efficiency was slightly better. Speaks to probably, speaks to how poorly they kicked, I think. So 65.4 to 62. We got smashed for kicking into forward, 50 retention, which was interesting. 39.5% of the time was our kicking into forward 50 retention percentage. Theirs was a remarkable 51.1%. So they were plus 11.5% for kicking in to their retaining it when they kicked inside 50, which is, again, I think probably would have been driving post-game and sort of in the analysis post-game wrap-up would have driven McRae nuts, because that's a really important number. Clangers, we had 57, they had 66. That's a lot of clangers in this match, but they were 9 more than us, so that was a really big factor in the game. And you combine those two, they kicked in forward 50 retention, and they just could not take advantage, or they didn't take advantage of how well they moved the ball at time. But some of those clangers were, clangers to the max, clangers on steroids, and caused, turnovers that we scored from. Kicks meters gained, we were plus 238 for meters gained by kicks. Handball meters gained, I talked about 628 to 909, so they were 281 more meters gained by hand. So our season average is 400. I think we're fifth or sixth for fifth, I think, for handball meters gained in the AFL. Maybe we're sixth. Pies are right up there, which surprised me, but they'll be even further up there. So they were plus 281 meters gained by hand. For context, AFL average is 325 meters gained by hand. So our meters gained by hand was over double, or almost double the AFL average, and well and truly above our season average. Time in forward half, beautiful 50-50 split, and that's probably what they like. Inside 50s, we had 3 more inside 50s. We had 3 more shots at goal. Slightly better percentage for scores per inside 50, 38.3 to 35.1. Goals per inside 50, 20% of the time we went inside 50, we scored a goal. Really similar numbers. Some of these numbers are really, really close. Speaks to obviously how close the game was. 19.3% of the time they scored a goal when they went inside 50. For context, AFL average is 24.4. So both teams a bit under AFL average for percentage of goals for inside 50s. We both took 13 marks inside 50. I predicted last week if we did get our running game going, our marks inside 50 would go up dramatically, and they did. So I think from memory last week, it was 7 marks inside 50 to the Giants, 13 or 14. This week it was 13 apiece. So they got, you get your marks inside 50, as I said last week, from that overlap running handball and those running in waves and moving it quickly from the halfback line, because it creates overlap and space inside 50 to spot up free and space for players to lead into, free plays inside 50 to hit. So AFL average is 12.2. So just to tick over AFL average both teams. The transition was stats were really interesting. So 20.7% of our chains resulted in a score, 17 for them. The AFL average is 22.1%. They were much better at moving the ball from their D50 to forward 50, reinforcing the point I made before. I mentioned this before, but reinforcing the point I made about the way they wanted to play, which was high transition, high, quick ball movement, high handballs from the back half. 25% of the time they went from defensive 50 to forward 50 when they had a possession chain. We were 19.1%. AFL average is 23.7. Defensive 50 to score percentage they were better than us in that as well, not so much. Yet defensive half to forward 50%, we were better than them, which is interesting. 36.2%, 30.7. Defensive half is essentially the middle of the line back. So, it suggests that a lot of that play, our ball movement began, in between the arc and the centre line. Defensive half to score percentage, 14.5%, tick above AFL average to their 12%. I mentioned the contested possessions. They were plus 7 for contested possessions, plus 13 for ground ball gets, plus 7 for post-clearance contested possession. They plus 2. We were plus 2 for plus 5 for post-clearance ground ball gets, I should say. We were 13 contested marks. We're one of the best contested marking side in the AFL, as I was talking about last week. And we took 13. They took 11 plus 2. AFL average is only 8.9 contested marks a match. So well and truly above AFL average, and we're trending that way. Our marking has actually been terrific. Clearances, I mentioned, they had 4 more than us. They had 2 more centre clearances than us, which was interesting. 2 more stoppage clearances than us. We had first possessions only 2 more times, which, we dominate that stat normally. And they beat us when they did win that first possession to clearance percentage was, they were a pretty remarkable number, this one. 82.5% of the time they won the first possession, they turned that into a clearance. We only did that 71.4% of the time. AFL average is 74.5. So they were really efficient once they actually won the first possession. That would have been another frustration for Macrae. You win first possession, you turn that first possession into a clearance 82% of the time. You are certainly hoping that you're going to do some scoreboard damage from stoppages. As I said before, we were plus 12 from stoppages. Intercepts, good, really fantastic defensive effort, and I probably should have pumped this up more in the sort of summary of the game. I'm really impressed with our defensive unit. I've been talking about the last few weeks. We're really trending in the right direction in terms of our defensive system, our defensive work. Bowie has been such a big in, goes about his business as a leader. He makes good decisions. He's an excellent kick. He plays. I think he plays like a player who's 200 gamer. He's so sort of calm under pressure. He's been massive. And Lever, as I mentioned on the Demon Lab podcast on Monday, he was amazing. It was a fantastic performance by Lever. Again, his leadership was awesome. So intercepts 71 to 68 +3. We were +5 at intercept mark, 17 to 12. We were down 8 for tackles. So this sort of, I think, speaks again to our tiredness, because normally we win that stat. 62 to 70. We were down 2 for tackles inside 50, but this was a pretty high number, 12 to 14. So 26 tackles across both teams. Tackles inside 50 is huge. AFL average is 10.6. So, so AFL averages for two teams is 20. So, 26 was the total. Ruck contest, we just didn't hit outs to advantage with 15 to 5. We had 52 to 23 hitouts, so +29 hitouts, yet we couldn't turn that into either sort of a scoreboard, only +12 for scores from stoppages, and we're down 2 clearances. So despite hitting out, 10 more hitouts to advantage and 29 more hitouts in total, we really couldn't get much bang for buck for them. And credit where it's due for Macrae. Part of that was how well he had it structured up. And I think I heard Maxie say, I definitely heard Maxie say that Collingwood are really good at sort of sharking and planning for sharking from the ruck. And I guess they have to be, given Cameron's their number one ruck. So, that they look to shark the opponent, the opposition's ruckman. Equity points. Ball winning, 121 of our 121.9 of our total player rating points were aggregated up across all 23 players. Were won for ball winning. 121.9, AFL average is 110. Excellent work there. Ball use, this sort of corresponds with the clangers and our better kicking efficiency. Ball use, 61.5 equity points for ball use compared to their 55. That a shocking day by foot. It was probably the biggest factor, I think, in us winning, to be honest. So AFL average for equity points for ball use this season is 51 points, 51.2. So well and truly above that. So impressive. We use the ball much better than, actually, when I'm looking at these numbers, much better than I had expected. Just quickly looking at some of the interesting numbers, quarter by quarter differential. Just looking at the last quarter. So again, it's pretty amazing. We won in some respects. They had 13 more disposals in that last quarter. We had, we were down 12 contested possessions in that last quarter. So I mentioned the contested possessions number. They got right on top of us in that last quarter. We were +5 contested possessions in the first quarter, +1 in the second quarter, down 1 in the third quarter. And the Pies were +12 for contested possessions when the heat was on in the last quarter. Again, that would have frustrated Macrae no end that they couldn't turn that into a win. We were +9 for marks in that last quarter, which is interesting given the disposal. We were down 13 for disposals. We had 6 more inside 50s. We had 2 more inside marks inside 50 in that last quarter, but 6 less tackles. The big one were equity post clearance was +13.2, and I think the really equity possession was the only we were -8.2 for winning the footy in that last quarter after dominating that stat in the first quarter, +10.3. In terms of equity ball use, they used the ball heaps better than us, heaps better than us in the first quarter. So we were down, they were +17.2 equity points for how they used the ball in the first quarter. In the last quarter, that completely flipped around. We were +18.1 points for how we used the ball. So I think Macrae got his sort of numbers wrong. We ran the game out better than them, as evidenced by the numbers in that last quarter, and particularly that one. We used the ball much better than them in the last quarter. In fact, I'm surprised how well we used the ball comparatively to them in that last quarter. That was a big factor. I went through the player rating points in the Demonland podcast. So I won't again other to say great game by Cozzy, 18.4 player rating points, and a terrific game by Fruta, 18.2 rating points. And our third highest rated player was Jake Lever, 17.1, Kay Chandler and Jack Steele. Harvey Langford was 6, but as I said, was hugely influential, I thought. Contested possessions I've talked about already, but it's worth noting in our forward 50 we're down. The Pies were plus 10 in our forward 50 for contested possessions. The Pies were plus 7, as I mentioned, post-clearance. Pre-clearance was level, 47 apiece. Expected scores, McRae talked about the fact that De Goey missed and, that they missed their chances, but really that's not, they did, I guess. So, but so did we. We missed plenty of chances. Cos kicked on the full, Cos didn't make the distance from 30 metres in that last quarter. Windsor missed a shot he should have got. Latrell missed a shot that he should have got. So there were plenty, Rue missed a shot that he should have got. So there were plenty of opportunities for us missing. The expected score, this is and I think this is probably a good indicator of our fatigue as we're tiring in the middle of the season, sort of hanging out for our bye, is I'd mentioned this a number of times through the season. I think it was up to round 10, maybe even around 11, is our actual score was higher than our expected score in every single game. That's changed as we've tied in the last 2-3 weeks. So our expected score in this game was 88.5. Our actual score was 83. Their expected score was 88.2. Their actual score was 75. On expected score, Mr. McRae, if you're listening, we still win the game. So we win the game by 0.3 of a point on expected score. But more importantly, we won it on actual score as well. In terms of territory, I mentioned 50-50 for the game. We're averaging 51-49 for the season. That last quarter was 53-47. The third quarter, where I thought we were in big trouble in that third quarter, we just seemed to have sort of slowed to a walk, and I was really concerned we'd hit the wall, so that sort of partly was one of the big reasons I was so thrilled with the win, I have to say. In that third quarter, it was only in our forward half 39% of the time, in their forward half 61% of the time. So that, that would obviously been concerning for King and the coaching staff. Turned it around the last quarter, 53% in our forward line to 47 in theirs. In our defensive side of the ground, half of the ground. Score sources, probably nothing really jumps out, particularly in terms of the expected change score. So in terms of the actual score sources, we didn't score at all from kick-in. They did. They scored a goal from the kick-in. The centre bounce numbers were really interesting in this game. We only scored 7 points from centre bounce. From memory, we only scored 4 points from centre bounces last week. So it's 11 points across 2 games in perfect conditions. We've got to turn that around. I think we will. And they could only score 1 point, though, from the centre bounce. That's a really low number. We're averaging 13.5 and we're giving up 12.5 a game. They could only get 1 point from the centre bounce. Stoppages around the ground, other stoppages other than the centre bounce, I should say. We scored 25 points. Our season average is 26.7. They scored 19 and we're giving up 26. So, whatever they were doing in terms of mitigating the stoppage stuff, they didn't really hurt us. They probably gave up a few. Well, let's just have a quick look at what their opposition, their stoppages. So there we go. So their expected score from their stoppages. So when they won, their expected chain score from the stoppages that they won, chaining out from stoppages, was 23.5, and their actual score was 19. So yeah, not disastrous, I guess. In terms of where our scoring began, the key one was defensive midfield for both teams. And attacking midfield. Points from defensive half, despite it being a high-octane arc-to-arc, game moving back and forth, as I was saying before, neither team really scored particularly well from their defensive half. We scored 30 points from our defensive half. We're averaging 38.9. They scored 39 points from their defensive half, a tick under what our opponents are averaging against us this season, which is 40.5. Centre bounce attendances, Again, it was just Cos, Steele, Sparrow, Caleb, Windsor who took the centre bounces. Luca Kenfield had 2 rucks, but again, we're just running with those 4 midfielders in the centre bounce attendances, which is interesting. I talked about ruck contests. And the hit-outs to advantage. So the last bit was pressure. So, the pressure in this game started off, as you'd imagine, high pressure. It looked like it actually felt and looked like a higher pressure game than these numbers suggest. And I was watching, when I got home, I watched the replay. And it was interesting because they showed the pressure rating at the beginning, I think, of the last quarter, or maybe it was the last quarter, and it was up to 220, but it really fell away in that quarter. So the pressure rating was 191 to 186 in the first quarter. So we were +5, 173 each team in the second quarter. In the third quarter, sort of corresponding with them dominating inside 50s and territory. And, our weakest quarter, I was really, really worried that we were going to turn up our toes. It was 164 to 184, so down 20. We turned that around in that last quarter. We were +9, 178 to 169 in that last quarter. And that was a massive factor, obviously, in the win. For the game, it was 177 to 178. So it felt, watching a higher pressure game. So, but I think that again speaks to 2 tiring teams. 180 is considered sort of average for pressure, though I suspect that's down a little bit this year, given there's much less stoppages this season with the way the game's being played. Top 5 pressure players were Tommy Sparrow, Kate Chandler, Jack Steele, Cozzy Pickett, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Harry Sharp. So, yep, that's the wrap up, the key numbers from that game. Great win. Really pleased we got the game, as I mentioned. The ladder doesn't lie, 5th on the ladder. Well past the halfway part of the season. I can't wait for our bye. They can't wait for the bye. It makes this game huge coming up. And, of course, to beat the Pies on King's birthday and for me to be able to see it live was awesome. Massive, massive game for our season, I think, leaving all the emotion aside, leaving everything to one side in that space. Massive game for our chances of finishing top 6 and obviously top 10. But I'm much more confident now that we'll finish top 6. Really important to make those 4 points. So let's look ahead to the Bombers game. I really probably haven't sort of drilled down on this as much as I probably would have liked to have. But to be honest, I think there's just too many variables really for an analysis of this game to be sort of that meaningful. One of which is, there's a number of them, but one of which is what's their focus? What's the club's focus? So Scott's no longer their coach. So if it was Scott was coaching, I'd be really confident the way they'd play this game is almost exactly the way that they did in Adelaide when they beat us, which is hold on to the ball in the back half and play keepings off and frustrate the hell out of us and force us to push up. Now, they might do that again. And if they do that again, we're going to have to do a much better job of not allowing them those uncontested marks, those uncontested kicks that they just smashed it, that they did so frequently in the gather round loss. So that's challenging to do if you're tired. So, I have no doubt Scott would do that. But, you got to ask, what's the point from Essendon's perspective playing that way? I mean, does it really matter? There's a good chance they'll finish bottom the way things are going. So maybe they're better to finish bottom and get the number 1 draft pick. But in which case, why not play in the way they want them to play and start getting time into a new game plan? But the challenge with that is they've got a fill-in coach. So Solomon, who knows what his philosophy is, and I've got no idea. So, but you'd think if they want to play a modern game, I mean, their biggest weakness over the last, for a long time, but let's say in the Scott era, was how poor they were defensively. So sure, they could be working on that and make it a defensive Dow game, but really to be competitive, they've got to get with the program and start moving the ball quicker, high handball meters gained. That's what Carlton have been trying to do. It's been coming out in the way they're playing. The variable there is, what do they want to get out of the rest of the season? What do they want to get out of this game? Surely, to goodness, they don't want to just turn this into a 60-point to 59-point victory. I mean, maybe they do, but to me, that's, like what's that going to get them? The other variable is the weather. So the weather's sketchy at this stage. It looks like 5 to 10 mils. Windy Saturday afternoon at the footy. So, that's a variable. As I said, Solomon's a new coach. I've got no idea what his philosophy is. That's an obvious variable. How exhausted we are physically is a variable. Psychologically, how do we come up after what was a massive, massive week this week? And it'll sort of continue this week because Neil Danaher, of course, played for Essendon as well. So, they'll probably honour him in this game as well. So, a few big weeks, high emotion. So, there's a number of variables. Looking at some of the sort of key categories that I've been doing every week for my preview. The first one is injury. I haven't really taken much interest, I'll be perfectly honest, in Essendon this season. So I was amazed when I looked at their injury list to prepare for the show, and they've got, I don't even know half of these players, but of best 23, you be the judge. Dyson Sharp, Darcy Parish, Angus Clark, Reece Unwin, Matt Guelphy, Isaac Kako, Andrew McGrath, Jai Caldwell, Vigo Vistini, Liam McMahon, Peter Wright, Zach Johnson, Archie May, Lewis Hayes, Brandon Fiorini, Nick Martin. That is their injury list. That is just nuts, isn't it? Like, that is unbelievable injury list. I mean, just off the top of my head, I can't recall ours. We've got Salem out, Xavier Lindsay out, Viney out. Now, of course, Myercheck out. So am I missing someone? There's probably one or two others, but certainly nothing like that. Of the best 23, I don't know their list well enough if I was honest, but Darcy Parish is certainly in their best 23. Isaac Kako, I'm guessing they would hope is in their best 23, given he was a high draft pick. That's 2. Andrew McGrath certainly is. That's 3. Jai Caldwell certainly is. That's 4. Vigo Vistini, I have no idea who he is. I think a pizza chain, but I don't think he's in these better best 23. Peter Wright out as well, 4 to 5 weeks. He's definitely in their best 23. That's 5. Archie May is, poor bugger, 6. And Nick Martin certainly is. That's 7. And chuck in Braden Fiorini for fun. And you're looking at 7 or 8 of their best 23 not available. It is really hard to see how they win any games of footy with that sort of injury list. As I said, I knew that the Tigers' injury list was bad. I don't listen to sort of any non-Melbourne footy media, so I actually didn't have a real good sense of how horrible their injury list is. That's a shocker. Selection. I think I read that of that list that I just read out, I think only Dyson Sharp is a test, so he could come in. I've got no idea whether he would ordinarily be in their best 23 or not, but he could come in. In terms of ponderables for this game, it's a really fascinating. It's one of my questions is, what do we do? How do we set up for this game? Do they manage players? If they do manage, who? You think that surely Max Heath comes back in. I'll get to the selections, but in a sec. But that's one of the questions. Sure, Maxie gets a chop out. Like most Demon fans, I'd be happy if they gave Maxie a rest. But you can't really see it happening, probably, to be honest. So bring Heath in, give him a chop out, do 30% 30% ruck time for Maxi, and rest him on the bench, perhaps 70% Heath. He played well enough in the Casey game last couple of games to deserve another call-up, and played well enough as in the ones as well, for that matter. A lot of talk about Latrell. I wouldn't be dropping Latrell at all. I'd be managing him. If he needs a rest, put him out for a week to manage him, but otherwise he's critical to our running power. So it'd be really fascinating, who could come in. Fitzgerald could come in. He could provide running power. Who goes out? I think, CJ will come in, almost certainly, I think. So CJ will come in. It'll be fascinating to see who goes out. So it's a bit of, much will depend on how much they want to manage players. But there's also another variable is that we can't afford to make too many changes, for one thing, and we cannot afford to lose this game. This is a critical game. This is not a game that we can afford a mulligan. We've had that already against the Bombers. If we want to finish top 6, we simply have to win this game, and so it makes me, really nervous. Must-win games make me really nervous, and so that's another variable. Given the importance of a win, do they really want to make too many changes from our best 23? Players who are possibly in the frame, Fitzgerald didn't have such a great game at Casey, but his running power is impressive. And so I can't see Jefferson coming in, almost certainly can't him. I think, the question, T-Mac might come out in terms of if you want to add an extra runner, it's going to be wet. So if they bring Heath in, we don't, do we want to have so many tall players as we did on Monday? Yeah, there's a lot to puzzle through on that front. In terms of the betting, such as it is, I wouldn't go anywhere near this match. One of my rules of punting is not to bet in games involving terrible teams, because you never know what's going to happen. But the odds are at the moment $1.17 for us to win 5-10. It's not a million miles from the odds in the gather round. So, that makes me even more nervous. The last 5 games, so just looking at the total match points is, what is it? It's 160. Yeah, I'd leave this game completely well alone. Even if I did bet on Melbourne games, I wouldn't be touching this game. The last 5 games, our average points for has been 92.4, so that's dropping down, obviously, from it was 101 or something, around 10, around 11. They're only averaging 65.6 in the last 5 games. The average winning margin for us is 26.3. They don't have an average winning margin in the last 5 games. They haven't won any. Average losing margin is 26 for us, 22 for them. So, they've been fighting it out. But I guess average total match points in the last 5 games, but the 179.4 for us and 153.2, speaks to the fact that they struggle to, put the score on the scoreboard. As probably no shock, really, given, as I said, their sort of crazy injury list that they've got. So just some of the, as I said, I sort of won't go into the predictive stuff very much because there's just so many variables. But looking at the, some of the like the key sort of stats around the key numbers, looking at this head-to-head all-time, 87 we've won, they've won 133. Let's get one on our column this week. Last 10 matches between these teams, the D's and the Bombers, 6-4 our way. The last game, obviously, was this year, round 5 gather round, 17-11, 113. They scored probably their high watermark for the season, and we were woeful, 10-8, 68. In terms of ratings, I mentioned last week was the classic example of 2 teams of, we were dominated the attacking stats, and the Pies dominated the defense stats. Well, this week we dominate all stats basically. So this isn't the classic one team with one strength. This is one team with almost no strengths, particularly given their injury lists, and against a team that's sort of up and about, coming off a win, not been in great form the last 3-4 weeks. How that looks in terms of rating points. So we're plus 5.9 for attack in our ratings. They're minus 13.6. It's nuts. For defense, we're minus 0.5, they're minus 10.1. They can't attack or defend. Doesn't make for a confident coach. I think Solomon can't be thinking he's too confident going into this game. Overall, the ratings are we're plus 5.4, they're minus 23.7. Just some of the key stats is they're negative differential, so they are averaging 2.1 less contested possessions per game than their opponent. We're slightly under, so we're at 0.3, so we're better in that space. Though in attacking, we're averaging 97.9 points a game for the season. They're 75.2. We're scoring 52.5 points from turnover this season. They're only 42.4. Big one, points from stoppages, 40.2 we're averaging, they're 28.3, and on and on and on. Inside 50s, we're averaging 57.3 a game. They were only getting 46.8, so they can't get territory. We're averaging 28.4 shots a game. They're only averaging 21.7. Defensively, there's one data point in this list of data that I'm looking at. It's on Wheelo ratings in the match previews if anyone wants to check it out. Is one thing where we've not bested them for this is in defence is point from stoppages. So we're giving up 39.1 points from stoppages, and so are they. But otherwise, in defence, we've got them, in all of the categories as well. The big one, obviously, is they're giving up 104.8 points a game. We're giving up 95.7, and that is trending in the right direction, that figure. In terms of their key players, their highest rated player this season is Zach Merritt, but only 13, and he's compared to Maxie's rating this season, 18.2. So Zach Merritt is their best player, and for their best player to have, he's an All Australian. Is he an All Australian? I think he's All Australian. Certainly has played at that level before. For him to only have a player rating of 13 and be their highest rated player, probably, it probably sort of says where they're at as a team at the moment. Nick Martins hasn't played, so the next one is Sam Durham, 11.5. Darcy Parish, who's out, 11.4. Will Setterfield is their second, 11.7. Sam Durham, 11.5, and Darcy Parish is out. And Peter Wright, who's out. Andrew McGarr, who's out. And Archie Roberts is out, rounds out their top 7. So of their top, of their top 1, 2, of their top 8 players, 5 are not rated players, I should say, this season. 5 aren't playing. So, yeah, they're in struggle town in terms of their injuries, but also who's injured as well. Our top rated players this season so far, no surprise, is Maxi Gawn, 18.2, Cozzy's 17.2, Kate Chandler, that is a surprise, our third highest rated player this season. Maybe it's not a surprise if you're watching the D's regularly. It may be a surprise if you're not a D's fan and someone else is doing a Essendon pod and looking at this number. Who the hell's Kate Chandler? 14.8. That's a fantastic season he's putting together. Jake Bowie is our fourth highest rated player this season, 13.3 rating points, and Jack Steele rounds out the top 5, 13.2, just ahead of Tommy Sparrow, 12.5. Interestingly, Trent Rivers is copping a fair bit on Demonland, I've noticed of late, and he is our 8th highest rated player. Now, he's only played the 2 games this season, so he's 6 games this season. So his player rating is how many? Yeah, 6 is 11.3 this season. So much higher than what many people would think. Bailey Richards next, by the way, and Harvey Langford, 10.2. Bailey Richards' season is a lot stronger than you might think. 10.9 his player rating is. He's kicked 17 goals this season. While I'm looking at it, just run through our goal kicking. Roo is our top goal kicker at this stage of the season, 20 goals. Cozzy second, 19. How's that, having one of the best, if not the best midfielder in the AFL? Certainly the most exciting player to watch. Second on our goal kicking list. Fritters third with 17. Harvey Langford, this is unbelievable, fantastic. He's our fourth on our goal kicking list. He's kicked 16 goals this season, fantastic. Equal number as Sharp, 16 as well, and Brody Mychek at Brody 16, and then to Kay Chandler. Maxie's got 8 goals this season, so he's had an amazing season, Maxie. So all in all, we should win, and it's a super important game. This is not a mulligan game. We're clearly tired. 5-day break is just a joke. It is just a joke give a team 5-day break, play them on a Monday. It was always going to be a big game, that Monday game, to then ask the Melbourne Footy Club to back up and play just 5 days later against the Bombers and given we haven't had a bye, is just absolutely flat out ridiculous. So, it really, they've got a 6-day break. We've just got to win. I'll be absolutely gutted, devastated if we lose this. I've told Andy already, if we happen to lose this game, I don't know, I'll be in any head shape to be doing the podcast, but we'll next Monday, but we'll see how we roll. I'll be getting along. I encourage everyone to get along, bring your brollies. They're not allowed to bring them anymore to the footy. Bring your raincoats. They really, really want D's fans to get to the game. And just on that, we had our highest ever, I think I'm right in saying 68,000 people who went to the Melbourne Hawks game. It was our highest ever home and away crowd against the Hawks. And a couple of other numbers. This game, I think, was the Pies game, was maybe the second or third highest between the two. Remarkably, 1956 or something crazy like that, there were 100,000 people at the G to watch Melbourne play Collingwood. That's a tenth of Melbourne's population at that point in time. So, huge crowd. But I also heard today on the radio that apparently the game was the highest rated home and away game ever. The Big Freeze King's birthday game on Monday, which is great for the club in terms of rewarding our sponsors. That's huge, like the highest rated home and away game ever. That's massive. So good on them. Just speaking of crazy stats, also heard that this, everyone would have heard this, has been out in the media land, is that I think it's the first time that 6 teams, there's been 8 games or some such, six games where the margin's been under single figures. And just the other one that I mentioned on the Monday podcast is the amount of running that Langdon did in this game was berserk, absolutely berserk. Just trying to find where I had it down. I think it was 16.9 kilometres. Where is it? 16.9 kilometres, nearly 2 kilometres more than the next best, which was Lipinski, who ran 15 kilometres. So almost 2 kilometres further than the next best. That's just absolutely crazy amount of running. 17 kilometres. I joked on the podcast, and it wasn't actually a joke, is I probably haven't run 17 kilometres collectively in a decade for 16.9 kilometres, and then he's got to back up 5 days later. That is just, it's amazing, the demands on modern footballers. I also, just another number that it jumped out, I mentioned this on the podcast on Monday night. Ed Allen went to, after Cozzy dominated that first half, he had 17 disposal, 2 goals in the first half. They put Ed Allen onto him, and he did a good job, and I had to laugh. I heard Coz interviewed, and he was asked about the job Ed Allen did, and he said, who? He didn't have a clue who was tagging him. But Ed Allen did a pretty good job in that second half. 16 minutes in the last quarter, Coz had only had 4 disposals in the second half before completely getting off the chain and arguably winning the game from us from that point. And again, that would have caused McRae just head to explode, I would have thought, to, for one player to be able to do so much damage. So in that last 14 minutes or 15 minutes of that last quarter, after only having 4 disposals up to that point in the second half, he had 7 more disposals, which included that shot at goal from 30 that didn't make the distance, kicked out on the full under little pressure, but also, of course, included that match-winning goal after just inexplicably playing on with 40 seconds to go. I guess that's because the most exciting footballer just about I've ever seen play footy, right up there with the Wiz. He's something else. I don't know that I can recall a player. I talked about this a number of times, that I mentioned again on the podcast. He really reminds me of Lee Matthews, that combination of just brute power, will to win, and incredible skills. But more and more, for me, that comparison's apt because of his leadership. In a big game on Monday, he steps up, he wins the Neil Danaher medal after, is it the Checker Hughes medal, after winning the Checker Hughes medal, I think it's called the Checker Hughes medal, on Anzac Day. Speaks to a player who isn't just a brilliant player, isn't just box office to watch. He's a leader on field and increasingly off field. He's a generational player, and if you're not the best, he's right up in the conversation, I think, now. Of course, he's got to do it a bit longer and over 2-3 seasons. But this season, just looking at this season in a bubble, he's right up there with, the very best players in the AFL at the moment. He's just been incredible this season. And, I just love watching him play. And thrilled, of course, that we put him on a long-term contract. All right, so get along to the game. I'll be there. Cannot wait. Hopefully we'll win. I'm confident we will given all of what I said, though, I'm nervous as all get out. Hopefully on Monday night when we do the podcast, or it might be Tuesday next week, actually. So when we do the podcast next Tuesday, I'm pretty sure it's going to be next Tuesday, with George and Andy, we'll be unpacking another famous victory and shoring up our spot in the top 6. Thanks for listening. I've been Binman, and I'll catch you on next Tuesday night and next week for the Stats File Preview podcast. Go Red Leggers.
It's a grand old flag. It's a high-flying flag. It's an emblem for me and for you. Well, it's the emblem of the team we love, the team of the red and the blue. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue. As we sing a song for you, should old acquaintance be forgot? Keep your eye on the red and the blue. Where the team played fine in the year 39, we're the team that no one can lick. And you'll find us there after the final bell with the spirit of 1926. Every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we sing this song to you. Should old acquaintance be forgotten?